Have this year's meeting in Montreux. I know many of you will miss this amazing place where we would meet always at the start of spring, especially after this online year and all of us being zoomed out. There could not have been a better place to meet, to re-energize and get ready for this year and decade of action. In a strange way, the pandemic has made both the urgency and the momentum for sustainability bigger than ever before. In Vision 2050, launched just a few weeks ago, we called it "It is time to transform." I hope me standing in Montreux now to record this video message will bring you some good vibes and inspire you for the coming days. This LD meeting is so important. It will take place in a whole new online environment where networking is again possible, although of course not quite the same way as here. We count on all of you in the coming days. We need to collaborate, build joint plans of actions. I wish you all a successful, impactful and transforming set of online meetings. I can't wait to meet you in the real world again as soon as possible. A Montreux playlist for your home office will come your way soon. Have a great Montreux.
Welcome everybody to this WBCSD Liaison Delegate Meeting. We are delighted to have you for what I'm sure will be a bold and dynamic meeting. We've got a very full agenda with inspiring speakers which is waiting for you across the next few days. Our plenary sessions will all be live streamed here, and as to the breakouts, you can access them on the breakout tab under this platform, where you can also find a full overview of the whole programme of the meeting. You can also consult the Liaison Delegate Meeting website for further details, and recordings of the meetings will be available on the Media Library tab for consultation on demand throughout the week and throughout the meeting and until the end of this week. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. This is Chatham House rules, which means in effect that you can't quote directly or attribute to people, but you can communicate on social media about generally the trends, the talking points that happened within the meeting, and we do want to create a little bit of noise out there, so feel free, just bear in mind those restrictions. And of course we don't want to run foul of any antitrust issues. You probably know what they are better than I do, but as it says there's a list on the screen: avoid talk of pricing discount strategies, group boycotts, allocation of customers, output decisions and future capacity additions or reductions. But those really are all the only caveats. Otherwise, the most important thing is that we have a productive, insightful, and really get to some of these big points that we want to talk about in terms of environment, society, government, social justice, equality, climate change, all these things, really the meat and drink of what we're going to tackle across the next 45 minutes in this meeting, and of course across the next 3 days in the various iterations of this. But first of all, I am going to introduce the President and CSO of the organisation, Peter Backer, for his keynote speech. Peter.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome members, global network partners, guests, colleagues. Welcome to all of you online today. Although probably all of us would have much preferred to meet each other in Montreux for this annual WBCSD LD meeting, the reality is that just like many of you, I'm taking this week's meeting virtually from my home office. I know there's a collective Zoom fatigue, but still, I'm convinced we can make this LD meeting a meeting of change, of transformative change even. Our team has put together a full program. We'll connect you through the latest technology for virtual events. You'll have rich content, see the opportunity to reflect and connect with all your fellow participants from around the world. And it should really make up for the loss of the amazing lake views that we normally have at Montreux. Less than a month ago, we have launched the Vision 2050 Time to Transform report that was developed over the past 2 years, together with the help of you, our members, and a strong external review committee. This is a report for change, urgent change, starting now. Our world is facing 3 pressing global challenges: the climate emergency, the loss of nature, and growing inequality. Each of them on its own can endanger the safe operating space for humanity, as well as the license to operate for business. And if there's one thing that we have all learned from the COVID pandemic, it is how interconnected these challenges are and how ill-prepared we were for the shocks that they may bring. The Time to Transform report describes the need for a long-term vision that we can all rally behind. 9+ billion people living well within planetary boundaries by mid-century. Let me repeat that. 9+ billion people living well within planetary boundaries by mid-century. Achieving this relatively simply worded vision requires a wholesale transformation of everything we've grown up with. Energy needs to decarbonize. Materials need to go circular. Food needs to be produced sustainably and provide healthy diets for all. It is really now or never for backing this concept of systems transformation with actions. And since transforming our global systems will take much more than just engineers improving the products and services that businesses produces, it is especially important that leaders everywhere start to change their mindset towards building a long-term resilience, toward a regenerative approach to business, and ultimately towards reinventing capitalism. I hope you will take the time to read Vision 2050, Time to Transform, as it's one of the most comprehensive, forward-looking and pragmatic reports I've read to date. And as it should influence the business agenda for this decade, inspire you to put more focus and more ambition in the journey of your company, and help you shape the agenda for your company's transformation. It offers businesses practical suggestions and thus creates a story of opportunities. I see all of this as a hugely exciting prospect, but I know it's not an easy one. However, whether you like it or not, we are all change makers now, with business having to play a leading role in the transformations towards Vision 2050, working together with governments, regulators, investors, and all people. But how, will you ask? Well, aligned with Vision 2050, I would like to emphasize 4 points for making the required system transformation real. First, it is about setting clear targets for climate, nature, and people, so we focus collectively on solving the 3 main challenges of our generation. Secondly, regardless of the sector you're in, identify the opportunities for your business to contribute to systemic and value chain transformation together with your stakeholders. Thirdly, this is about identifying the changes to innovate as an organization. And last but not least, ensure to adapt your governance model. So it's about integrating ESGs in the performance management and valuations beyond just the financial results. It is time to transform and time to make these 4 points and the shared vision real. The next 3 days of meetings, as well as the Vision 2050 report, should provide you with the tools, guidance, inspiration, and continue and accelerate this journey. We know that 2021 will be crucial for global collaboration and transformation. And we hope that global events like the Food Systems Summit, the IUCN Congress, CBD COP15, our own council member meeting, and COP26 will take place either online or offline to contribute to the transformation and realization of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. It is time to transform. It is time to think systems. It is time to create true value now. I count on you to join us on the decisive journey for our generation. At WBCSD, we stand ready to support you in making this happen in any way we can. Today, though, we are kicking off the 2021 LD meeting with a plenary session on reinventing capitalism. This mindset shift will ensure that the economic system, our incentives, the global accounting standards, and the capital market valuations will no longer just be based on the financial performance of business, but integrate the impact on the planet and people as part of how we define success and determine the enterprise value. This move to capitalism of true value for all will accelerate the transformation toward 9+ billion people all living well within the planetary boundaries faster than anything else. This year, we will also be seeing a continued acceleration of sustainability moving into the financial realm of companies due to changing attention from capital markets and important steps towards creating an international sustainability standard by IFRS and others. These conversations have now made it into the mainstream, and all of this means that sustainability will become a major part of the CFO responsibility. One of the reasons for us to launch the WBCSD CFO network. And this CFO network is poised to become the voice of business into these major financial disclosure and governance developments. If there is one wish or ultimate objective I could share with you today, it would be to ensure that sustainability will be part of the fiduciary duties of every board within the next 5 years. So to kick off this morning's plenary session, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Mazzucato. Mariana Mazzucato is professor in the economics of innovation and public value at the University College of London, where she is the founding director of the UCL Institution for Innovation and Public Purpose. She's a renowned economist who helps policymakers understand how the global economy really works and how we need to fix it. Mariana, thank you so much for being with us. On your website, you claim you're on a mission to save capitalism from itself. Your most recent book is titled Mission Economy, a Moonshot Guide to Changing Capitalism. Those are bold ambitions, pretty well aligned, I think, with our Vision 2050 Reinventing Capitalism. Would you mind sharing with us what has to change to make stakeholder capitalism a reality and what mindset shifts are needed from business? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It's a real honor to be here. And I'm also very lucky because I can speak about my book, which actually goes to the core of many of the inspirational things that you just discussed. If there was a one-liner of what my 10 minutes today will be about, it's that I really think we need kind of a moonshot mission-oriented approach to environmental, social, and corporate governance changes, the kind of transformation that you talked about. We need equivalent level of urgency, a completely new way of collaborating with different types of value-creating institutions. We should always remember that even the word partnership or ecosystem, it's not a normative word, it's just a fact. There are partnerships out there, there are collaborations out there, but often they're the wrong kinds. You might have, for example, a predator-prey ecosystem, a parasitic ecosystem, or a truly symbiotic and mutualistic one. And I really want to be asking, your audience in this discussion today, what would a mutualistic, mission-oriented collaboration look like in order to actually achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? Because we're simply not getting there quick enough. We're not treating it with the level of urgency that we tend to treat wartime scenarios or even crises like the COVID crisis. When we find out about it too late, we flood the system with lots of money. We try to get different types of collaborations, but if that's not actually nested within how we've designed our capitalist system, then we have a problem. We'll simply not get there. And I want to just begin with some, definitions. What is the market? What is a market economy? What is capitalism? Unfortunately, we sometimes confuse the word markets with business. Markets are in fact outcomes. Markets are outcomes of how we organize and govern all the different value creating institutions and their interrelationships, as I was just talking about. So whether that's public institutions, they can obviously be governed in all sorts of different ways. Private sector institutions, as we know, can of course be governed in different ways. We might have some that are just literally focused on maximizing their share price. Other ones that truly try to do exactly what you've been talking about, which is really to put this notion of stakeholder governance and common purpose at the center of how they actually create value. There's also third sector institutions. So, also nonprofits, which in some sectors, whether it's health or energy, are actually taking on an increasing role. They themselves can be governed in different ways. We have trade unions, which we shouldn't forget have been absolutely central to the history of capitalism, to getting us the kind of markets that we have. We wouldn't have weekends. We wouldn't have the 8-hour workday. We would still have children working in factories without the labor movement, right? So all these different types of organizations and institutions can be governed in a particular way, but also how they relate one to another. You will have heard the concept, for example, of the just transition, the kind of urgency that we require today for transforming our value chains in order actually to meet our climate targets have to also be done in such a way that is just for all the workers who are working in sectors that will be transforming. But what does it mean also to bring the voices of workers, of students, if we think of Fridays for the Future, the Green Movement, and so on, to the table ex ante, not just ex post, having to adapt to a transition set by someone else. So I think that idea of co-design and co-creating our future is equally important. But this idea that markets are outcomes, right? They're outcomes of how we make all those decisions that I just talked about, I do think is a really important point, because otherwise what happens is we look at things like stakeholder value, which is being talked about. Anyone who's been to Davos in recent years, it's all about purpose and stakeholder value. If we don't understand stakeholder value at the center of how we actually organize the market system, and at best think of it as a change to corporate governance, so an intra-organizational discussion within business, as opposed to putting it at the center of how different types of organizations work together, then I think it's really a lost opportunity. And that's, I was actually on, I think it was the opening panel this year for the World Economic Forum, which was on stakeholder value. And I stopped the conversation at one point. I said, hold on a second. Someone's just said that to talk about stakeholder value, we need to begin with the recognition that actually value is created inside business. And then we need to look at how it can be redistributed across all sorts of different stakeholders. And I said, no, hold on. That's where we tend to get it wrong. Value is actually genuinely created collectively through all sorts of different actors. And if we don't begin with that understanding, then all the talk about the need to transform our system towards the SDGs, all the talk about common purpose, all the talk about stakeholder value is literally just talk. It's very hard to walk that talk unless we begin with really recognizing the immense social infrastructure around us. The technologies, whether it's the internet, GPS, touchscreen, inside our phones, came about through a collective creation of value. In that case, it was actually governments worldwide that got us things like the internet, even HTML, which came out of CERN. Many of the different types of energy technologies, renewable energy, but also fracking came from a huge collective creation of value. Workers, obviously, it's not just about, making sure they're paid well, which of course they should be, not just making sure that they have good working conditions, which of course they should, but actually recognizing the value that they create, the ideas that they bring to the table, the energy and effort, but also literally how they're working together. What does it actually mean to put them, as I was saying before, with enough power to actually even feel the want to bring their own value to the table, given how they are actually treated. And on that, front, we know that there's different ways, in fact, to do that. There's countries like in Scandinavia where trade unions are on the board, and other countries where workers, even where they are working, 8-hour, 10-hour shifts, still are not earning enough to, for their livelihood, but also their own opinions, their own value that is brought to the workplace isn't appreciated. So what my recent book says is that we should be serious. We should be walking the talk of stakeholder value and purpose for areas like the Sustainable Development Goals, which we shouldn't forget. They are quite recent. It was only 6 years ago in 2015 that they came about. We have not treated them with the same amount of urgency that we have treated and that we continue to treat crises when they come about, again, too late, or when we have common projects like, unfortunately, often winning a war. And so what would it look like if we treated, for example, SDG 13, climate change, and actually turned it into a moonshot? For example, having, 100 carbon neutral cities in a country. What would it look like to treat SDG 14, which is clean oceans and life below water, with a really targeted common purpose of getting the plastic out within the next 5 years, and looking at all the different types of sectors in the economy that would have to work together in order to achieve that. Because we shouldn't forget that the moon landing itself was not just, NASA. There was huge amounts of investment in innovation and nutrition, electronics, materials. The whole software industry in some ways was an outcome of that. But they paid a lot of attention to how these different value creating sectors work together. NASA, for example, was very keen on making sure that the value that was created was equally shared. So they had a no excess profits clause in their procurement contracts. They also wanted to make sure that they themselves understood their environment as much as the companies they were working with. So they were very careful not to over rely on what we would call today consulting companies. So this over outsourcing from the government brain that we see in many different countries today. They really believe that to create value together, both private and public had to be equally ambitious, dynamic, and investing within their own dynamic capabilities. And so I think, your point that you just mentioned about setting clear targets, actually getting different sectors to create value together with all the different stakeholders, to be able to innovate within an organization through this idea of purposeful transformation and adapting governance models in such a way to achieve that, that's key. But it's very hard to do unless we have a common purpose and unless we actually understand that this has to be interactor, public, private, third sector, intersectoral, and that we need to really learn how to walk that talk of common purpose. Otherwise, it's just a wasted opportunity. We're just seeing this as a corporate governance kind of gimmick while not actually understanding all the different changes that have to occur in society and how this symbiotic, mutualistic ecosystem itself can be transformative. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mariana. A very insightful speech and plenty to go out there. Well, we're going to get some reactions to that from a range of business leaders from Turkey, India, Europe, international perspective on what we've just heard. And we're going to start with some thoughts from Cenk Alper, who is CEO and board member of Sabancı Holding. Sabancı Holdings are a big Turkish industrial, financial conglomerate, also with interests in retail and cement and really a big player in that country and elsewhere. So Cenk, take it away. What do you think of that?
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I would like to reflect on Professor Matsukato's speech by explaining our journey of transformation in terms of putting sustainable value creation at the heart of our strategy. We have a strong corporate culture of 90 years, sharing what we have obtained from this land with its people, which goes back to the famous quote of Mr. Hacı Ömer Sabancı, our founder. Building on this deeply rooted culture, last year we have rephrased our purpose, growth areas and strategic direction for all our subsidiary companies. Our new statement of purpose is: we unite Turkey and the world for a sustainable life with leading enterprises. This purpose is built on the idea that all our operations should ultimately serve for a sustainable life. So with that, actually, we also claim that we will bridge between sustainability efforts of our country and the world. So we try to play a leadership role over there. That's why we are partner of WBCSD. So in that direction, we have given, we are working in an ecosystem where our suppliers, our customers, financial world is working together to create a sustainable life. So as the private sector, I think we have to shift our mindset of growth strategies and reimagine the way we design our products and services. So if you look to the strategic direction that we have given to all our subsidiaries, they all responding to SDGs. What are they? Providing wider customer experience to all our customers, transforming into an agile global footprint, pioneering in sustainability, leading in digital and material technologies, and finally adapting the future of work, which is very crucial part of the sustainability efforts. Under these strategic directions, our are focusing on e-mobility, distributed energy generation, renewable energy, production of lightweight materials, which is very critical. Professor Matsukato mentioned about NASA. So we supply some materials to aerospace with lightweight materials, which is at the end very beneficial for the e-transportation, I should say. Plus, leading carbon dioxide reduction through sustainable building materials. And we have to also take care of aging population. And finally, with our bank and insurance systems, I think we should also work together with our ecosystem by financing them in a sustainable way. So those are the reflections from our strategy. What I want to say that it is in the heart of everything, the higher purpose of our company. We have more than 60,000 employees, and I think that that purpose is very well embraced by all our employees.
Thank you very much indeed, Cenk, and we'll have time to talk about some of the things you raised and discuss that with other members of the panel. I'm going to move straight on to Virginie Duperat-Verne, who is Chief Financial Officer of Arcadis, and Arcadis are a big Dutch-based, European-based engineering and design consultancy. Virginie.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to join this meeting today and to represent Arcadis around this panel. Arcadis is a global design, engineering, and consultancy firm for built and natural assets. And so what we do is that we design, we plan, and we help our clients build places like, for example, neighborhoods in cities and some buildings. But we also work on mobility infrastructure for people to move around, like bridges, roadways, but also everything which is related to rail transportation, and also parts of telecommunication networks like data centers. We provide service and solutions to enhance resilience, helping protect people from climate change and conserve natural resources for future generations. And today we are 27,000 people over 70 countries. Our purpose is improving quality of life, and that resonates quite strongly in the heart of each and every Arcadian. So it's perhaps no surprise that sustainability is really fundamental to our work and the way we think. We strive to embed sustainability in all that we do, in our work for clients, but also how we run our company, how we engage with our employees, our communities, and all our stakeholders. We have decades of experience delivering sustainable outcomes for our clients all around the world. And what we know is that whole companies, including us, need to do much more to create the conditions for sustainable development. So we are taking bold steps to help move things in the right direction. And maybe I'm just going to name a few here. As part of our current sustainability strategy, we've been committing to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in line with a less than 1.5 degrees temperature increase by the year 2030. We're also working to make sustainability a key part of all the technical and advisory solutions we offer clients. And we've also committed to creating a workforce that is more than 30% female by 2023. And already, as of today, our executive leadership team is 50% composed by ladies and by gentlemen. And through our World Business Council membership, we are connecting with others, like-minded companies, who are also committed to pursuing sustainable development. And so thank you for everyone to be here today, and I'm really excited about the panel discussion.
Virginie, thank you very much indeed. Merci bien. And now straight on to Sanjeev Puri, who is Chairman and Managing Director of ITC Limited. ITC are a big Indian holding company with interests in hotels, agriculture, paper, even matches, I gather. So put a match to the conversation. Let's get it really burning, yeah, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Tom. I could not agree more with what you said, Professor Muscato, and let me give our perspectives. You see, we always believed that the purpose of an enterprise is not merely to create economic value. An enterprise must simultaneously create economic, social, and environmental capital. And while doing so, it must remain competitive. And we call this within ITC responsible competitiveness. This has been our philosophy for over 2 decades. And it's embedded in our corporate strategy, is embedded in what the board measures and reviews. It is the DNA of the organization. And with little steps and some big steps that we have taken over a period of time, I'm happy to share with you that we are the only enterprise in the world to be water positive, carbon positive, solid waste recycling positive for 18, 15, and 13 years in a row. Our value chains support 6 million livelihoods. 41% of our energy is from renewable sources. The world's greenest building is the headquarters of our hotels business, which also happens to be the greenest hotel chain in the world. More recently, one of our hotels in Bangalore, the ITC Windsor, got declared as the first net carbon zero hotel in the world. So these are just some data points to explain what we have been able to deliver over a period of time. The second comment I wish to make is in ESG, the letter S to me is very important, particularly from the area that from an Indian perspective. The issue of not only human rights but gainful livelihoods, and also the quality of livelihoods. That's to do with the social inequity. And in India, of course, we have this issue of creating livelihoods, but half of our workforce is in the agriculture value chain. And that half of the workforce accounts for 17% of the gross value add. That reflects the lower earning capacity there. And it's been our endeavor, that's the area we have given a lot of thrust to create inclusive value chains. And we work with the farmers to empower them with the know-how to improve productivity, to build climate resilience, and create rainwater harvesting capacity, because India is a water-stressed country. And today we work with 4 million farmers. Our mission is to empower 10 million farmers over a period of a time. And this is an area that I think we've been able to make a significant impact over a period of time. Over 1 million acres of land is actually irrigated through the community water harvesting structures that we have created. And we have tried to create business models with the farming community that not only nourish the environment, but simultaneously empower them economically. So there is an incentive for people to adopt those models. I will, I think, stop here because I think my time is over, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed to all our speakers for being punchy and brief, which is how we like it in these introductions. So, Mariana, first I'm just going to hand over to you. If there's any particular things you want to come back and pick up on, I've certainly got some questions, but
Sure.
You first.
Sure, thanks. I mean, so first of all, it's fascinating, and especially, coming back to that intersectoral dimension, it's so important to hear from different sectors and how they're putting kind of ESG targets, but also transformation at the center of the value chain itself, as opposed to the old way where it was at best corporate social responsibility as sort of a charitable thing on the side, not at the center of value. But I think one thing I'd like to kind of provoke again, coming from what I said before, is maybe you could just give some examples, the different speakers, of how their own transformations have been done at the center of the system, as I was mentioning, right? So, I mean, let me just give you a really quick example. With COVID-19 recovery funds globally, these are trillions of euros, dollars, et cetera, that are going into the system. In some countries, they're just literally handouts, subsidies, and kind of bailouts. In other countries, they've put, again, the ESG kind of targets at the center of how the recovery funds are being dispersed. So in France, for example, the recovery funds that were given to both Renault, the car manufacturer, and to Air France were conditional on those companies actually committing to lower their carbon emissions in the next 5 years. In Denmark and Austria, they did the same thing with tax havens. Those companies using tax havens are no longer sort of able to use, the recovery funds. In the US, taking into consideration the $4 trillion of share buybacks that top 500 companies have used, have spent just on buying back shares, as opposed to reinvesting, profits back into the system, that itself is coming. Biden is thinking about using conditionality on reinvestment of profits as part of, again, contract, the social contract that I've been talking about. Can you maybe just give an example, any one of you, of how conditionalities have been used in your own sector in terms of putting ESG kind of targets at the center of public-private relationship?
Yeah. I'll come back up the line if I may. So I'll start that with Sanjeev. And have you seen this conditionality in Indian bailout offers? I'm not quite sure what the bailout offer has been in India, but has there been this kind of in this relationship? Sanjeev?
Well, I'm not sure whether I have the right example, but I can share with you some of our examples, how some of this value has got created through mutual interdependence. Now, I'll give you two examples. One is to do with our paperboard business. More than 2 decades back, India was dependent on import of pulp. And of course, the reality is that a lot of livelihoods are created in the forestry than in the mills itself. And India had this challenge because corporate owning of farmland was not allowed. And India, the land holdings are fragmented. That was not amenable to this kind of creating a fiber value chain. So we innovated and created, with some research, we created some fast growing trees, because to expect a marginal farmer to wait 8-10 years to get incomes was impossible. And then we innovated on an agroforestry model where he could have some crops and trees together. So he has an annual income and once in 4 years, some additional income. And we restored wastelands. India has huge number of wastelands, about 30 million hectares of wasteland. And today we have, through this process, greened more than 800,000 acres of agro and farm forestry. It's given employment to 150 million man days of employment. And what this has done is that it has converted unproductive land to productive land. The farmers are earning more. The tree gives, the plantations give them additional income. And for us, what it has done, it has created a sustainable, a renewable, and a competitive fiber value chain, because it has been done in the command area of my facility. I don't have to cart it all the way. I'm not dependent on the global ups and downs of commodity prices and currencies and so on and so forth. So it's created value for both the enterprise and our stakeholders and for the society. And it has also become a big carbon sink. So that's one example I can give you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. That's great. Virginie, any particular examples of how you've really transformed within the board, or if you want to pick up Mariana's question about whether the build back funding has had conditions on it?
Yeah, I think it's quite a key question, and thank you, Mariana and Tom. I think that on our side, like probably a lot of companies, we first enter in the crisis, really wondering what was going to happen to our clients, and if we would be able to adapt, and not really exactly knowing what would be the impact. So governments have quite, let's say, been inventive all over the world to try to propose to offer some measures and such. Like other companies, I think we've been benefiting here and there from furlough measures and this sort of things. But we quite rapidly realized that we were able by ourselves to put in place measures to deliver the work we had in backlog to our clients, that our clients were still also adapting and able to be on the responsive side. And the entire chain has been quite efficient also to make sure that there was a strong focus on cash. On our side, we made sure that really we collected the cash we had to collect on our receivables, and making sure also that we were sending back the cash to the rest of the chain, so that there was no cut in the value chain. And if you have a look to the balance sheet of Arcadis, you can see that at year end, frankly, the level of free cash flow was quite high, with a lot of receivables being collected. But the other way around, our amount in supplier debts was maybe a kind of record low, because there was really an incentive on our side, making sure that we were, let's say, protecting also the suppliers, the subcontractors that are working with us and that are quite key in our delivery. What is also quite important for us is the launching programs pushed by the government and such to relaunch economies, because we are at the beginning of the chain as engineers. So as Marianne said, there is a lot of incentive to develop more, maybe greener project in the future, and we are really well positioned to support clients to develop carbon neutral or at least carbon saving infrastructure here and there. We are working in a lot of projects. Some of them were already on the table before the crisis, and not all of them, frankly, have been stopped. They have been rather highly pushed. So we are at the moment working on the HS2 high-speed railway infrastructure in the UK, and that's something that started in the end of last year. Quite a lot of mobilization for us at the moment, and probably also the capability for us to say, hey, we need more people. We try to hire much more, and I think that we start seeing a little bit of pressure on our side in terms of competition to recruit people all over the world. So back on track on a quite positive curve, I would say. And the other way around, we took care not to let go our people during the crisis and try to make savings in some not important things, I would say.
Virginie, thank you very much. And I was smiling at your mention of the high-speed rail link here, because if you broke through the wall behind me and went about 3 miles, about 5 kilometres, you'd see where they're making a hell of a mess of the country around me. But
I'm sure you'll like it.
I guess you'd, well, I might like it. I'm slightly dubious of how much it'll be used in the era of the new era of digital communications. Anyway, I want to move on from that. A question that I think kind of unites you all, or an issue, is this issue of sustainable building materials. A lot of you are involved in this or involved in building. And if you look at cement and steel, these are massive, massive carbon emitters. And there are some alternatives beginning to come out there in terms of lower carbon cement, lower carbon steel. Shane Kalpe, you mentioned lightweight materials as well. Is this driving down to using less and better of these really carbon hungry materials? Is that really happening? Because it seems to be an example, if it were, of walking the walk rather than just talking the talk.
Yeah, the light materials that we are producing are carbon fiber materials generally used in mobility sector, starting from aerospace, airplane industry, and now with the e-mobility of cars and rails is moving to automotive industry. Because what we know is that carbon dioxide emissions of a material, of a car, etc., are the highest when we utilize the car, when we run the car. So that's why we try to decrease the weight of the car or the weight of the airplane. On the second, we have a tire business, Bridgestone joint venture. The second very important thing is the rolling resistance of a vehicle. So the material improvements that we do also are decreasing the rolling resistance, so decreasing the fuel consumption of any car. On the building side, yeah, it is hard to replace cement right now. But what we see is by strengthening the cement, we use less cement. We improve the heat resistance of cement. Plus, with carbon capture technologies that are emerging right now, we are trying to minimize the impact of carbon dioxide emissions to the environment. Coming back to the first question, I think in Turkey, two critical things. One is the renewable energy. Turkey is really supporting renewable energy investments, and industries are linking themselves to the renewable energy assets so that they consume less carbon dioxide emissions. This is very, very critical, I think.
Thank you very much indeed, Cenk. I'm going to come back just to end with Mariana. Do you believe, Mariana, that this can be done? Can we save capitalism? Can it move from a predator-prey relationship to something mutualistic, which some of us, raised on films like Wall Street, might think is a contradiction in terms? But can it deliver what you want?
It can. And, I think it's really important to learn where we do it well and to learn where it's completely failing, what works, what doesn't. And, coming back to the steel sector, which you talked about, the reason Germany today has one of the most innovative and green steel sectors in the world is not because they just woke up and said, oh, we need to do this because it's the right thing to do. They did it because they had to in order to access a very large loan from their public bank, the KfW. That was a condition. They had to lower the material content of steel, which they did in their own innovative way through repurpose, reuse, recycle technologies. And, this issue of conditionality, I don't like the word because it sounds like you're kind of banging someone with a stick. It really needs to be a new social compact. And I think that's why it's also really important to use this COVID-19 moment as a sandbox, a test case. If we can't do it, for example, with the vaccine, if we can't actually govern intellectual property rights for the vaccine, which is so important to be universally accessible, to have a patent pool, for example, which is what the World Health Organization is calling for, then how are we going to do it in areas that are much less, urgent? And so using whether it's, digital platforms, whether it's health technologies, whether it's green transition plans in different countries to really foster a new type of relationship between public and private sectors, I think this is the moment. And if we don't do it, it's, again, a real lost opportunity. Just one last thing. In Europe, currently, the next gen EU budget, which is meant to be our own kind of Build Back Better budget, what's so interesting is it's also created a conditionality, not just between public and private, but public and public. The money will go to the member states only if they have a climate strategy, only if they have a digitalization strategy. That's a very different type of condition that we saw after the financial crisis, where the conditions were austerity, right? You can only get money if you promise to cut your deficits. So I do think it's also a very good moment. We have the SDGs, we have this new kind of Build Back Better strategy, which does pose some of these conditions. And we have really interesting lessons in places like Vietnam or Kerala and India, where actually they reacted much better to the crisis on the back of lots of investments they also made within their own public administrations, but also building trust between business, academia, and government. So let's learn from those experiences.
Thank you very much indeed, Mariana. I think I had a great example of conditionality in France, where they were insisting that all public buildings must be at least 50% wood to avoid some of the carbon emissions associated with concrete and steel. Forgive me if I'm undermining some of the markets of people on this conversation, but moving to wood, it would be a great thing. Mariana, thank you very much indeed. And of course to Cenk Alper, to Virginie Duperet-Verne, and also to Sanjeev Puri. That's pretty much it for this morning's session. Thank you to Peter, of course, for kicking off this session. He'll be back on some of our other talks later today and throughout the next 3 days. The audience can access the breakout session under whichever one you choose under the breakout tab. And there is available later on today a meditation session, so you can really get and focus your thoughts in a period of calm, as well as just getting some rest. And so you will find those during the break. And once again, you can get to that through the breakout tab. And of course, you can connect with your peers in the networking section of this platform. You can do groups, you can do one-to-ones. I know it's the thing that we most miss about these occasions is not having that, but pretty much they facilitated everything you could wish by way of meeting. You just can't hug. You're going to have to wait a little while for that. But thank you very much indeed. And I will see some of you later on today.